Diana Rigg, the lady with the superior exterior. Millions remember you with pleasure as Emma Peel in the Avengers, but in the last couple of years you've kind of made a new sort of breakthrough, emerging, it's generally agreed, as one of the greatest actresses of our day, in roles as Testing as Medea, Mother Courage, and now Martha in Hobbies, Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Do you have to dig deep into yourself to play roles like that?
Yes. That's why one does them. It's a voyage of discovery of the person that you're playing and the person that you are, too, which makes it quite exciting. You're always serving a text, always. There's nothing that you bring to it that isn't in the text. But it is, in fact, the marriage of the person who is playing the part and the part.
What did you find in the text of Martha's role in Virginia Woolf that particularly appealed to you?
She's generally described as a monster and a harridan. And, of course, there is that aspect of her. But at the same time, she's incredibly touching, like a lot of people are who make a huge amount of noise as they go through life. There's a sort of still, small, rather frightened centre there. And it was that that fascinated me about Martha.
Did you find that in the text, or did you find it in rehearsal?
It's definitely in the text. As you read the play.
So what do you get from a rehearsal period? What do you get from the director?
A great deal. I love the rehearsal period. It's my favourite time. I like playing, of course, but the rehearsal period is a time when you can examine everything. You can experiment wildly. Throw the net of choice, of options on a part. Very wide indeed. And then as the rehearsals progress, you distill down and down and down.
What is acting? What happens when you're acting?
I'd prefer to take that question from the other side. When the audience comes to the theatre, they come to believe. They make an act of belief. They pay their money and sit in their seats and are prepared to believe. And you, as an actor, have to answer that belief as best you can, as truthfully as you can, in the part that you're playing. So it's a process of finding the truth within the character and playing that so that the belief is sustained.
Do you want the audience to believe that what they're seeing is real? And doesn't that sort of limit the notion of theatre as something that can excite, can shock, can amaze, can astound?
No, because reality excites and shocks and amazes and astounds. It's astonishing to me that people who can go to cinema and be in Memphis, it's on the screen in front of them, and yet they come to the theatre, and in our case it's New Carthage or a place in America, and they believe they're there with absolutely the minimal of sets to sustain their belief.
They're not. They're supposed to believe you think it's real, not that it's an illusion.
They want to believe that. And because they want to believe that, you must answer it. You must give them what they want to believe.
In a world of cinema and television, why does live theatre matter?
Because of what I spoke about earlier. Because of this, it's almost like a cat's cradle of threads from the actor to the audience. You can feel it. It's a sort of communion happens. I'm fascinated by quite how close the church and the theatre is. In fact, after the Dark Ages, when the theatre was dead in Europe, it sprang to life again through the church. And it's this almost tangible at times feeling that comes from the audience to you and goes from you out to the audience.
Before you get onto the stage with the audience, what can you get from a director? What does he or she contribute?
Well, he's objective for a start, and that is very important. Otherwise you can dig yourself really deep into a part. And he can say, no, 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 pull back on that, push on that. He orchestrates. But he also, he can help you in the process of discovery. He is a different person, after all, or she, and is seeing it a different way. And he can put different points to you that you may be missing.
When you played Euripides' Medea, speaking in verse, you played a mother who murders her 2 children because she's disgusted with their father, with her husband. How on earth do you make that sort of role real to an audience?
Well, people always forget that a play has a course. And it is in the course of the play, within the course of the play, that prepares you for the climax, the killing of the children. It has to happen that way for the audience to believe it. They have to see why. They have to understand why. It wasn't for me to justify my action, but it was for me to explain to the audience when she did it, through the course of my performance, why she had no other option.
Are you conscious that you're at a peak of your career?
No. What I am conscious of is that I'm incredibly lucky to be playing these parts at my age, 58, and that I very much hope to go on learning in the course of my career. I don't believe at any stage you can say, this is my position, this is where I stand. The business isn't about that. It's about pushing forward all the time. Even if you're playing, which I will be in a few years' time, small parts, but just discovering all the time.
But you're enjoying life?
Enormously. Who wouldn't?
Where were you born?
I was born in Yorkshire, of Yorkshire parents. My parents were, in fact, living in India at the time. And my mother came home to have me because I was the second child. I have an older brother.
How much older?
4 years. Right. And I think she found giving birth in military hospitals in India 58 years ago pretty tough going. So she came home to have me.
What sort of chap was your father? Where did he come from? What did he do for a living?
He was an engineer. He was very interesting. He was a very clever man. And he worked his way, he was an apprentice, and then he worked his way up. And he then took a view that he wasn't going to get very far in England. Or if he was going to get far, it was going to take him a long time. And he answered an advertisement in the Times to go out to India and to build railways out there. And he came up to London and had an interview, got the job. And then, almost within weeks, was sent out to India as a very junior member, and sent down to the end of the line to build the railway. And I don't think he saw a white person for a very long time. And what they used to do, after a 5-year tenure, they'd send them home to England to find a bride.
And he did?
And that's what he did, yes.
Do you have memories of India?
I do, yes.
What do you remember?
I remember quite a lot. I remember the garden and the house that we had, and the ayah that we had.
That's a nurse?
The nurse, like a nanny, yes. And the heat and the sounds and the smells. I also remember, now I must confer with my brother. The house had quite a tall wall, the garden rather, had quite a tall wall around it, and it was on the outskirts of Jodhpur, or Jodhpur. And I remember one afternoon, there was a particular stillness, because usually there's a sort of noise, a sort of thrum in the air. I seem to remember, but there was kind of stillness. And Suti had been committed that afternoon. And my brother and I...
That means...
is when a woman is widowed and she throws herself on the pyre of her husband. That is what they used to do. It was outlawed, I think, shortly afterwards.
What's your first memory of pleasure in language or speech or...
It's to do with poetry, when I was about 11.
What do you remember?
I remember the pleasure of reading a poem and understanding why the poet, or as well as one could at 11, why the poet had chosen certain words. Because of the sound and because of how one word would be in contrast to another or possibly embellishing another word. And that excited me a lot.
Your father read to you, I think
Yes, he
you
did.
said, when you were younger than that.
When I was much younger, yes.
What
And
do you
I
remember
used
of
to
that?
sit on his lap. And I remember the rumble within his chest of his voice, which I loved. It was very comforting.
You went to school in England.
Yes.
How was that?
That was quite tough.
You were at boarding school when your parents were still in India.
Yes, they sent me and my brother, which is what happened in those days. They considered it the
At
best
what
thing.
age?
7. It was supposed to be the best thing for us.
Was it?
I think one's relationship with one's mother was damaged for a time, as inevitably it would be, because it ceased. But we picked up later on, and I don't think I was particularly...
And they came back to
when they
Britain,
came back,
yeah.
and I don't think the damage was permanent. I don't think it was.
Who encouraged you to act, to go into the theatre?
I had a teacher when I was at school, a later school, called Sylvia Greenwood. In fact, who's still around and I'm still in touch with. And she had an ambition for me. This is the truth. I didn't know much about theatre, but she was the one who said to my parents, I think Diana could possibly do well in the theatre. My parents were somewhat taken aback, as you can imagine, because theatre in those days, and certainly for people who didn't know much about the theatre, it was pretty wild, it was pretty naughty, libertine.
This was a very religious school.
Well, the school I was at was Moravian, yes, but my parents' view of the theatre was sort of, ragamuffins, not terribly respectable profession.
Well, of course, it wasn't like that at all.
I think it has been. Aspects of it, yes.
Were you a good student at RADA?
No, I wasn't. I was in the first year, and then I discovered the joys of London life, and I sort of slackened off a bit.
Right. And so what happened after drama school?
I went to Rep, which I had the happiest time, I think, in my life in Rep. You always look back on your young years as being happy, but it was so wonderful. I was right at the bottom of the pile. I had nowhere to go but up. I was on equity minimum and living in digs. I was playing small parts and doing stage management, which I adored. And the Rep that I was working in had one sofa and maybe a couple of chairs and tables and stuff like that. But anything extra we needed, I'd have to go out round the shops and beg, ask the local shopkeepers who were so bored of the ASM coming round every week and saying, could we possibly borrow? And the sofa, I seem to remember, we had to cover every week.
Oh, to make it look different.
To make it look different, yes. So I'm rather good with tacks and copy decks, covering the sofa quickly.
You joined the Royal Shakespeare Company. What was that like?
That was wonderful. Again, I was bottom of the pile. It was Glenn Byam-Shaw's last season, so he wanted to go out with a bang, so it was completely star-studded. Dame Edith Evans, Laurence Olivier, Paul Robeson was playing Othello, Albert Finney was a juvenile in the company, Vanessa was, and I walked on together in Othello. I remember being really impressed because we were all told to kneel when Othello makes a safe landing from Cyprus and pray. And Vanessa broke into the Lord's Prayer in Italian, which I thought was deeply impressive. And watching all these people at work was, of course, wonderful.
Who were the directors there? Who did you learn most from?
Tyrone Guthrie was a very wonderful director. He was so energetic. And what's interesting is if you are just one member of a crowd, and a director takes trouble to make you an individual within that crowd, which he did. Very few directors do. It's interesting. Well, in those days.
You went on to get good parts. You played Cordelia in Peter Brook's Lear. How was that, the Schofield Lear?
It was a wonderful production. I don't remember being wildly happy as Cordelia. Paul was wonderful. Peter Brook,
good to work with?
He was very authoritarian, and he somewhat put me in a straitjacket in rehearsals. And then the final dress rehearsal, he said, "Do it your way," which was...
He realised you couldn't do it his way.
Absolutely.
And that helped.
Well, I believe in being directed, and at 20, whatever I was, my way wasn't completely and utterly worked out. So I was at sea for quite a long time, but I eventually evolved something which passed muster.
But of course, if acting consists of finding something in one's life and in the character's life that one can bring to a part, it must be easier to do it later on than at the very beginning of your career.
Yes. Cordelia's easier when you're young, because she says, you know, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. And when you're young, you can't do that.
How tall are you?
5'8.5". I sort of paused over it because I'm told as you get older you shrink, and I haven't been
I thought you used to be 5'9".
Sorry?
I thought you used to be 5'9".
I think I've always been 5'8.5".
Right.
I don't fib about it because there's no point.
But what are the implications of being what was then, perhaps less so now, regarded as rather tall for a woman? I mean, in the parts that you can play, does it?
I think it's hard. It was certainly hard on Paul Schofield to carry me in Lear.
It pushes you towards leading roles, doesn't it, a bit?
Yes, I suppose it does. But also, I was never the accepted juvenile. In those days, the juvenile was small and blonde, and I never was, of course, that. So I had to sort of stick around for quite a long time before I was ready to play parts. Also, I think I wasn't ready. I think I wasn't quite as prepared as some people are at an early age. Perhaps I was a late developer.
You left the Shakespeare Company to play Emma Peel in ABC's The Avengers. Why did you do that?
Well, I didn't understand what television and certainly being in a series meant, because I didn't have a television. My parents had one, but I didn't have one. And I hadn't seen The Avengers. But what I knew was that I was working my way up a company, had reached a certain level within a company, and it's rather like being in a family, that they see you, they give you a persona. Well, within this company, they give you a sort of certain line of parts, and I was always going to just be doing that line of parts, I thought. I didn't always want to do the classics. I wanted to extend, to learn, and so I left the company and I did one television play and then auditioned for The Avengers and got it.
What was Emma Peel doing? She was a sort of action girl, terribly cool, terribly physical.
Yes, more. She wasn't just physical. She was also pretty well equipped intellectually. She was as clever as a man at computers. She was very self-sufficient as a woman, and that I think made her quite different on television.
Yes, it was thought of as a very tough, advanced role for a woman to be playing.
Yeah.
Yes. Was there or was there not? She was called Mrs. Emma Peel,
yes,
wasn't she?
there was a husband, supposedly.
There was a husband somewhere.
Somewhere, but it was very convenient for her to be Mrs. and the husband was missing somewhere.
Do you think the viewers were supposed to think there was something going on between Peel and Steed, Patrick Macnee?
Well, they always asked about it, and I think rather like those wonderful Hollywood movies of the 30s and 40s, where sex was never explicit and gentle flirtation kept people titillated, that you could sustain a relationship for a much longer period.
Yeah. What did the Shakespeare company think of your going off to do this?
I think there was a lot of looking down the nose at it, somewhat. In those days, it's changed now.
What was the effect of them? You had a huge success in what was a terribly popular series that is still available on video and playing. What was the effect of that on your career?
Enormous. I was suddenly famous all over the world. Japan, Finland, Australia, all over the world.
Did you like that?
What I didn't like, and what I was totally unprepared for, was going out in public and pieces of paper being thrust under your nose. I wasn't terribly well equipped for newspaper interviews where they chat you up and put you in a certain light. That aspect of it I didn't like terribly, and I don't think I handled awfully well in those days.
Yes, and now of course and then you were thought of as Emma Peel, and now you're not.
Yeah.
In the 70s, you had all sorts of hits in Abelard and Heloise and The Misanthrope, in Jumpers, which I always remember with huge pleasure. Was that a happy time for you?
Yes, yes, it was lovely.
One or two directors, and no doubt the playwrights also, suggested you take your clothes off in one or two of those plays. Is that ever a good idea?
Looking back, no. But at the time, the excuse for an actor is, the director says it was necessary. Well, I don't think it was necessary. Absolutely not. Certainly not in Abelard and Eloise, because the actress who took over from me refused to, and they still went in their droves to the theatre. In the case of Jumpers, I think it is necessary. It wasn't a full nude. I think it was just my back, wasn't it? Yes.
I think so.
Or bum. Back and bum, I think.
Do you enjoy working for Tom Stoppard's written two great parts that you've done, hasn't
Yes,
he?
yes. I love working with him. Again, he's the most miraculous wordsmith, and always immensely challenging.
In the 80s, you sort of had other things to do. And
Yes, I did.
yes. Marriage and motherhood. And did you feel that you couldn't quite keep up the level of acting activity in that time as you had before, or were you considering opting out altogether, or what was the relationship between your role as wife and mother and your career?
I think I married quite late, and I had a child quite late. And I made a conscious decision to put the career on, as they say in America, the back burner, because I wanted to, because I wanted to be a good mother. And you can only really be a good mother if you're there. Of course, there are other aspects of motherhood, but in essence, when a child is small, I wanted to be there for all the important things. And so I was.
You lived a lot in Scotland. Do you
Yes,
enjoy
I did.
that?
Yes, I love it. I love the countryside. It's a very sustaining love of mine, to go out into the countryside, just walk. And fishing, I'm very fond of as well.
Are you good at you fish for trout?
I'm not bad. I have to say this because it's great art, and there are some people who are brilliant at it.
And how many hours at a time can you spend with a rod in your hand?
All day.
All day?
Absolutely no problem.
In any weather?
Any weather. Pouring rain, doesn't matter. Hope springs eternal.
Do you shoot?
No, but I have retrieved. I had a dog for a long time.
What are you reading these days?
I do a mixture of autobiographies and novels. Interestingly enough, during rehearsals, I don't read at all. I find it really, really hard to go home and read. I just have to wander around the house and do things and internally just state. And reading seems to cut across that. Once the play's opened and running, I can, with great pleasure, pick up the books again.
I mean, in some ways, to a member of the audience, the most extraordinary feat for great actors and actresses in demanding roles seems to me to be one of memory and concentration. Is it very hard to learn a long part?
Yes, I've always actually found it easy, but in the case of Olby's play, both David Suchet and I found it really difficult. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is the brain cells dying off. But I discovered that Maggie Smith had enormous difficulty with her part in Three Tall Women. And there's something about Olby's text. It's very dense. It tends to curl back on itself. It can be repetitive, but not directly repetitive. Repetitive with one word changed or whatever. So it's quite hard to learn. But the exercise of learning is terribly important. Dame Sybil Thorndike used to learn a poem a day until almost the day she died.
I mean, can you drink during a run? Or,
I never drink during the day, but I have a very speedy glass afterwards.
How do you choose a role? Do you go banging on to people about, I want to do this, or do they come to you? Or how does it work out?
Generally they come to you. I've recently done Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca, and I tended to bang on a bit about that because I did want to play her. But in the theatre I've found it's rather better if they approach you.
Why did you want to play Mrs. Danvers?
Well, because I think she's so fascinating, and because of Judith Anderson's wonderful portrayal of her in that black and white movie. And in a sense, it's quite bold to tilt your lance at an icon like Judith Anderson. And I don't even mean to tilt my lance in a sense, because it's so many years later.
And an icon like Elizabeth Taylor in the movie of Virginia Woolf?
Yes, that's different.
Had you seen that?
Yes, oh yes, one of the first things I did was to get the video out and have a look-see. But that is different. They cut it, first of all.
Because it was a movie, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, if you see someone else giving a powerful interpretation of a role like that, can you ignore it or learn from it or glance off it or what?
You can definitely learn from it and ignore the bits that you can't learn from, I think.
Diction is important. Is it an underrated accomplishment, clear diction?
I think you have to have it in order to be able to discard it if necessary. It's like having a voice with a huge range that you can use if you want, but you can also just use a tiny bit of it when necessary. Similarly, your body has to do everything that is required of it within the part. Speaking
verse, how can one speak verse and still sound natural?
I sometimes talk to students about this, but they find it really hard. They dislike the discipline. And I try to explain to them that once you've absorbed the discipline, you have infinite freedom within that discipline. You don't have to go to dum, to dum, to dum, to dum. You don't. But you have to have it as a sort of, as a vibration in your body, and then you can break it at will.
I mean, could that perhaps be true in life also, that you're better for having a discipline within which you can find freedom?
Oh, yes. Very much so. Yes.
Have you found that?
Yes. Yes.
You believe in God?
Yes.
You go to church?
Yes.
Every Sunday?
No. I find it particularly difficult with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because we have 2 shows on a Saturday, which is leaves one rather like a sort of a non-person on Sunday. I mean, with no voice, no energy, no personality, no thoughts, no nothing. But I do go to church. I find it it replenishes me. I like that period where you commune in a body within the church. I'm at Church of England, so I love the hymns. I always try and get there early so I can read the hymns through, because there's some wonderful verse in them.
Do you sing them?
Oh, out. roar them out.
How do you think of God as a man or as a woman? Or as a sort of white splodge or something?
As a force.
As a force.
Yes. He makes, she makes, it makes some terrible mistakes sometimes. But I don't think I could go through life without a belief of a force greater than us.
Have you had rough periods where you've needed that?
Yes.
Often?
Yes. No, I've been remarkably free of rough periods, but I have had 1 or 2 rough periods, and my belief has sustained me. Interestingly enough, you do go to church on those occasions, and you do find answers. I mean, they aren't the immediate resolution of your problems, but it is a balm.
How important is it, if you're giving a demanding performance, to have a secure and stable personal life?
I think it's very important. I would rate it home life, children and family. I'd put it above a career, actually. I think it's the starting point of everything. And you can go out from that, and whatever the world deals you, you can handle, if you have that.
Would you recommend your daughter to go on the stage?
If I thought she was dedicated enough. I think it requires you to be very single-minded.
Might she be?
She might.
How do you keep fit?
I walk a lot. I don't sit around very often. I'm sort of on the move most of the time. And of course, the theatre, every night, Who's Afraid of It? It's like a workout every single night.
Are you raging against aging?
No, I'm not. What I dislike is when my body will not answer, when it creaks, when I get out of bed and it hurts. I really dislike that, but I don't dislike it because it is saying age to me. I dislike it because it is not doing what I want it to do, and everybody dislikes pain. But all the things, things that happen, particularly to a woman's body, and I think nature is particularly cruel to women. Men, somehow, the final crumble doesn't seem to happen. I can see you looking
I'm looking
optimistic.
admiringly at you.
Optimistic.
No.
The final crumble for men happens much later than women. Women, it happens sort of 50s to 60s, and it happens in the most terrible places. You know, your underarms go and everything. And I've worked out this exercise where I sort of look at myself and say, I love it. I love it. It's been places. It's done everything for me, and there it is.
What do you hope to do next?
I don't know. I don't really plan much ahead. I think that's one of the joys of this profession, you know. And largely, if I can find something in direct contrast to what I'm doing now, I'm very happy.
Is it difficult to combine appearing on the stage with appearing in a film or on television?
No. Oh, do you mean doing the both together?
Well, yes, in the same period.
I think it's jolly hard. I have done it. I was younger. I don't think I would contemplate it now because largely you have to sustain and keep your energies for the evening performance, and I'd feel disloyal if I did a film at the same time.
Is it easy to make the switch from one to the other?
Oh yes, no problem.
Which do you prefer?
I prefer the theatre because I'm those people out there.
What do you fear most?
I suppose most of all Alzheimer's, going blind, losing faculty, that. Being a burden to my daughter, that's what I fear. But we do have a deal. There's an actor's home called Denville Hall, and it has a bar, and it's filled with old actors, and I've said to Rachie, as soon as I get hard to handle, just shove me into Denville Hall.
That, I would guess, would be quite a long time away.
I hope so.
Mother Love concludes tomorrow at 9, and you can see Dame Diana Rigg's final TV role in Black Narcissus, Sunday the 27th of December. A quick preview coming up right after this.